I believe that one of the greatest responsibilities we all have is to learn how to give our lives more meaning. My name is Matthew Paetz, and on the More Than the Business podcast, we're going to talk about how starting a business with a mission is the greatest way to begin changing the narrative of your life so that you can start making the impact and the income you were designed to make. Welcome to the first episode of the More Than a Business podcast. This is an episode that I'm extremely excited to share with you because not only is our guest today been the lead sideline reporter in the NFL, the NBA, the NCAA, and even the Olympics, but she also happens to be my big sister. Stacy Paetz is a phenomenal professional, and today she shares a lot of intimate details and some stories, quite frankly, that I have never even heard until now, where she goes into the importance of trusting yourself and the courage it takes to go first. Being the firstborn, she was also the first to go to college in the family and has also held the first positions in many of the professional achievements that she has accomplished. So she talks about the courage, the trust, and the importance of being able to recover after receiving negative feedback from some of the biggest platforms in sports. I hope you get as much out of this today as I have, and I really look forward to you being a part of the More Than a Business family. Thank you. So my first real question is, how the fuck do you do this for a living?
Yeah. Doing this for a living is just, man, I guess it's just in my blood, right? It's one of those things where I knew at such a young age at 15 and never looked back. I was truly tunnel vision. There were other things I wanted to do. Lawyer was one of them. I wanted to be in a courthouse, like busting balls, right? And then interior design was another, and then sportscasting. So those were my top three. When I learned how much schooling becoming a lawyer would be, I'm like, yeah, I kind of don't want to go for 6 more years. And interior design, I still do that for fun. I love designing and decorating and turning things into what they're not supposed to be, but they look really cool. But yeah, sportscasting is just my thing. But that's what's so funny. Like, you know me better than anybody, and I like to call myself an outgoing introvert because I have no problem meeting people, no problem, speaking in front of big crowds if I'm called to do so. And it could be random even. Like, I could be at a party and if someone's like, oh, say a few words, if I had nothing prepared, I can do that. I might be a little bit nervous because I care. But ultimately, if there's a camera at a wedding, I'll shy away from it unless they ask me, hey, say a few words, or hey, be part of this video. I don't seek that attention. I don't try to be in the middle of the conversation or turn the mic on me, turn the camera on me. That's what makes it so funny that I'm in television.
I just love that. Just even in this 2 minutes that we've been on here, I am somewhat venturing into your wheelhouse on this side.
Yep. And I love it.
It is overwhelming, folks.
It really can be, right? It really can be. And I mean, and if you think of it in terms of reps, as you and I often do, you can't just walk into a gym and throw up a couple of free throws and be at 100% for the season. Like, it's all about reps. I have literally called thousands of games across many platforms, live, taped. So I've got a few more reps than you. I think you're doing pretty well.
That's hilarious. Yeah, give me daddy issues. The moment headphones don't work, like, I come unraveled.
I get it. Believe me, I get it. Now imagine being on live TV and the monitor going down when you're in halftime, literally calling highlights. And
you're making me nervous.
Right, and you have no monitor to call highlights. That's a true story. Happened live on Fox Sports during an NBA game. 2 things worked in my favor. Number one, all the credit goes to my producer. His name's also Matthew Scott. Wonderful human, knows how much to speak, when to speak, the details I would need. And I would give myself some credit there too, that I obviously paid attention to the game, had my own notes. So he could just say, first quarter, Danny Granger dumps it into so-and-so, blah, and I can call it from there with no visuals whatsoever. So it was a combination of him trusting me and me trusting myself. And thank God for all of that, because it was, talk about nerve-wracking. I've had lights go down in the middle of a show, a live show, and you just got to go with it. You just got to go with it. And also, when you're on TV, people don't know that you're fighting the flu, or you have a headache, or you didn't sleep the night before. They don't know. Some of them may genuinely care, but you don't share that, right? You just show up and do what you're meant to do. And yeah, it's funny. There's a lot of smoke and mirrors.
Yeah, and you touched on something really powerful right there, which is the idea of trusting yourself, which I'll come back to in a moment. But I think this is so fitting. This literally the issues that we're having and getting all this set up, and the stories that you're sharing, because yes, I do have some familiarity with your story, and your themes and your challenges and your successes and all of those kind of things. I've had such a unique and privileged position to be able to see it from the behind the closed door. I got the phone calls where you're like, shit just hit the fan, but I was watching live and I was like, really?
Yeah, I know, right? And that
Yeah.
means the world to me. That means I covered it up well. Like, I would call mom after shows and be like, man, could you tell that this happened? She's like, no, not at all. So
Yeah.
that's a good thing.
And I love it. And as you know, this is, for me, this podcast in particular, and all that's coming behind it, is been a long time in the making. And it's really it stems from my own personal struggles and fears. And I'm not just talking about the super, like, deep stuff, which, we get into often, but I mean, the stuff that I know for a fact every single person deals with. And unfortunately, the things that I believe are responsible for um, derailing people's potential and their stories more than any other, which is, that fear of launching, that fear of just taking that first step, knowing you're ill prepared, knowing that you're not as skilled yet as you would like to be, or you believe you should be, or however the other people think you are.
Yeah.
Right, or whatever that looks like. And that's really where I would love to genuinely hear a little bit more about some of your experiences. In particular, how would you describe, I would, if someone were to ask me, I would say one prominent theme of your life as an outsider, yet someone so close, is that you've always been the first, right? The first to go, the first to do it, there's so many firsts. Literally, you were born first.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
Yeah.
I think, like, you were born in the pole position. So but when you look at that, and you think about your stories, what you're the first to go to college, the first woman to do so many of the things you've done, there's so many firsts in your life. How would you describe, what it's been like going first, and the belief that you must have, I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth. I'd love to just kind of hear what comes up for you. Like, what's it been like for you to go first in so many, in basically every major category in life?
Right. Being firstborn, I would say, is my greatest challenge. But also,
You're
but
welcome.
also, but also the most beautiful gift, right? And I put a lot of pressure on myself as the first. I'll start with the family aspect, being the first in the family, the firstborn grandchild, the firstborn female, um, and born to a young mom, and we grew up together. You pointed that out to me. Like, here I was living closer to it than anybody, but you're the one that said that to me. Like, you and mom grew up together, and we did, right? Like, she was figuring things out with me figuring things out, right? And as the firstborn, knowing that I got to, and I never thought I was better than anybody. It was never about, hey, do what I say, even though I'm certain I came across that way in so many aspects with all of you, with you and all the cousins,
I thought you were
especially
going to
with you.
say, although I'm certain that I'm right.
Well, I was getting to that part. If y'all would have just listened to me from the beginning, but it was
you
never
weren't wrong. So.
right. It was never about, I'm better than you, I know more than you because I'm older, because I did this first. It was because I was older and went through some things, and I had to
Mm-hmm.
learn the hard way, and I had to learn on my own. I didn't
Mm-hmm.
have anybody else to tell me this is what you should do, or these are the options you do have. So with you and all the cousins, it was like, man, if I can save them a little problem or a trauma or a disappointment, or make their path easier because I've been through that, that's what I
Mm-hmm.
want to do. But I also know that as a firstborn female and Aries, a fire sign, like super
Mm-hmm.
determined, very tunnel vision with a lot of things, wanting to be perfect in everything I do. I also know, and I'm certain that I came across as bossy and pushy in a
Mm-hmm.
lot of ways, not intentionally, but also wanting
Mm-hmm.
to get my feelings and thoughts across, because I come from a
Mm-hmm.
place of protection also, as you know very well.
Absolutely.
So going to attach two of your questions, from being the first and also some of those experiences, I started in this business so stinking young. Like,
Mm-hmm.
wow. Like for me, it was a badge of honor for so long, and it still means a lot to me. As I look back and take inventory of situations that I was in, I had no knowledge, no support. I had no one guiding me. I had no mentor. Again, I'm the first. I'm figuring everything out on my own. I'm making mistakes and figuring out how to correct them along the way.
Mm-hmm.
I'm calling a game, and at the end of the game I'm like, "Dang, why didn't I do XYZ?" Which I also look at it as everything is a stepping stone to the next thing. Like I have no regrets in terms of the jobs that I did, what I learned along the way. But where I'm the hardest on myself is where I didn't have support. I didn't ask questions because I was afraid. Also, I'm so young. I'm the only female. If I ask questions, they're automatically going to think she doesn't belong here. How did she get
Mm-hmm.
here? Why is she here? So I did take a lot of that pressure on myself, because I was afraid if I asked for help, I would appear weak, unprepared, unqualified. So there were a few times early in my career, when I say so young, for those that don't know my story, I knew at age 15 I wanted to be a sportscaster. I saw Chris Berman on Sports Center, and I looked at mom and I said, "That's what I want to do." She goes, "Okay, do it."
Mm-hmm.
And I never looked back. And
Mm-hmm.
I was fortunate that at our high school, at Western Boone High School, they had a radio and television program, and I just jumped right in and did that, and did that at Ball State University as well. They didn't have a sports division at Ball State; they had only news, and I knew I wanted to do sports. Period. No questions asked. Nothing else intrigued me. Only sports. And the news division that they had, I had to create my own. I had to create my own opportunities in sports. I called the volleyball coaches from the men's and women's programs and said, "Hey, can I call your games?" And when I tell you I was god awful, I was god awful. I had no clue. Like I knew how to talk about the game, but there were other things that I just didn't. I wasn't. I didn't have the confidence or the repetition to know how to pivot, when to pivot. I'll never forget, and I got to tell you this too. The head men's volleyball coach, I actually saw him here in California. Ball State was playing at UCLA, and he brought it up to me.
Oh
And with falling short of saying you were god awful, he said,
no.
that was obviously your first broadcast." That was his very kind way of saying you're god awful. But and I can tell you the exact thing, because it's still in my brain, because I'll never forget it. The gentleman that was calling play by play, I already had everything in my mind what I was going to say. And so he teed up a question for me, but that's not what I was prepared for. I was prepared to talk about what I wanted to talk about. So he teed me up the question. I didn't even answer his question. I'm like, "Well, first," and then I started talking about something else. Whereas now, if that were to happen, I have enough repetition and I have enough skill set and understanding that I can pivot and figure out ways to do that. One of the toughest things in my career, I was doing college football for ESPN, and I was so excited. It was one of those things that I wanted so badly. I had started my career with ESPN, and college football was always something that was so fun for me, and I love being on the sidelines. And I'll never forget my very first game, Louisville at TCU, and it was a super windy day. and we had a production meeting up in the announcer's booth. And as I was walking down the stadium steps, I could feel my knees knocking because I was so nervous. And it was my first game, and I was like maybe 21 years old on ESPN college football.
Mm-hmm.
And that was such a special moment, scary, special, all the things. And during that same season, I had a devastating moment. Some people say that all press is good press. I don't subscribe to that.
Mm-hmm.
I was doing an interview at the end of a game, and the young man that scored, it went into double overtime, I believe, and the young man that had scored the final touchdown that won for Clemson, I had known him. I had known him in high school from my work with Scholastic Sports America, the high school show. And because I knew him, as I'm interviewing him, I'm like, buddy, you got to tell me, how did you get daylight to score that final touchdown to seal this for your team? Sports Illustrated wrote about me after that game. Who does she think she is? This young, pretty girl on the sidelines calling an athlete buddy. And I was so devastated by that because Sports Illustrated, ESPN, like I thought, am I going to lose my job? Sports Illustrated wrote about this, and how dare they? Like, this guy should have done his due diligence. Had he even spoken to me, it's not like I called him baby or honey or sweetie or love. I called him buddy. But to me, in my 21-year-old mind, I was crushed.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, had that reporter done his due diligence, he would have known, not only did I know this young man for a couple years at that point, I knew his family, I knew his sister. So he was kind of family to me in a way,
Mm-hmm.
to call him buddy. But I've learned a lot since then. That was a long answer. You're welcome.
Yeah,
I'm eating up your airtime.
that's all right. I love it because you just shared something I think is extremely powerful and um, right on topic with what I was hoping we would get into. Which, if I understand correctly, it sounds like you're 21 years old. You're on the biggest stage, arguably, that exists in your field. You're on ESPN. You're doing college football, knowing full well there's probably just a ton of eyes on this, and yet, and not only that, you're interviewing someone that you're also familiar with, right? So in many ways, in real time, I have to imagine that it probably felt pretty ideal, right? Almost like a
Yeah.
home court advantage for an interview, right? But
Yep.
then, so again, you're on ESPN, and then the biggest, the biggest publication out there, Sports Illustrated, again, kind of two giants in that field, then write a story that kind of paints you in not such a favorable light because of one word that you said. Let's be honest, isn't really that deep.
Yeah.
But I have to imagine 21 years old, first game, biggest network there is, biggest platform you could probably be on at that time.
Yeah.
And then you get written up by the biggest publication at that time that you probably imagined your name in for ever since you were 15.
Absolutely. And hoped to be in a positive way.
Right. And here it was in a way that didn't feel good to you. So how is it that at 21 years old, on the biggest stage, with the most pressure that you probably felt up to that point, you get what felt like a negative comment or write-up about you personally and how you do your work? That part of yourself that you described earlier as that you trust, like here it was being attacked. How does one bounce back from that?
Yeah. I was crushed. I definitely cried about it. And I had a couple people say how cool it was, but you're in Sports Illustrated. Who cares what they said? You're in Sports Illustrated. You should keep this. You should frame this. I didn't want to be anywhere near it. I wanted to find every magazine and rip them up or throw them away. I didn't want anyone else to see it.
Sounds like someone that was not in Sports Illustrated getting attacked.
Yeah, exactly. I think thankfully I was young enough to where they say when we're young, we're resilient. I definitely take issue with that a little bit. When we are young, we are more resilient, but it still sticks with us. It doesn't matter. Like a 5-year-old who doesn't get picked for kickball until last every time, that's going to stick with that kid. So there was resilience there. Nobody from the network ever talked to me about it. Excuse me. which kind of gave me a feeling like, okay, I guess it's not as big of a deal as I made it to be. No network executive called me, pulled me aside, emailed me, said, hey, what happened? It was not brought up. So I just kind of decided that I got to let that go. And it was so early in the season that I had to focus on the next game. They were coming swiftly. And that was also my saving grace, is knowing that the next game was coming so swiftly. I had to let it go. Had to.
So this is really powerful because, as you know, we're recording our very first, podcast together for the More Than a Business show, and this is something that I shared earlier has been in the making for, years. I've been sitting on this for years, and the reason why, um, I've not moved forward or followed through on this dream of mine is because of fear, right? Because I fear being ridiculed and attacked, and all of these things, and basically, some stranger out there, doing their best to prove that I shouldn't be doing this, right? So all of these things and this narrative has been running through my mind. And what I would love to hear is, it sounds like it was probably a bit of a gift and a curse, but for someone in a position like, I may be today, and I know you actually are in some other projects that I'll be excited to talk about at some point, where you don't have the gift of, a schedule that's bigger than you, demanding that you let it go so that you can show up again. Whereas in so many, I think, people's world where they're building their dreams and they're putting themselves out there for the first time, you're under your own schedule, you're under your own demands, right? And when it's under your own, it's so easy to be like, it's too much. I'm not going to do it today. I'm just going to avoid it. I'm going to read my book more. I'm going to do it. I'm just going to do anything else except that part that scares the shit out of me. And you were saying, like, again, you got hit day one on the two biggest platforms that existed in sports at the time. And it just happened to be your very first show at 21. And yet you had to let it go because you had to show up 6 days later.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So what would you say, looking back in hindsight, for those moments where either someone has received some feedback that's overwhelmed them, been unfavorable, or they're afraid of it? Like, how would you go about getting back in front of the camera, uh, metaphorically or literally, when it's under your own pressure, when nothing is demanding that you show up?
Television has also been my purpose.
Mm-hmm.
It's my platform. It's my opportunity to give people a voice. I have the microphone, but they get to use their voice.
Mm-hmm.
And in that moment, leaning into the fact that this is my purpose. I didn't feel like I made a mistake in my heart. What I did was authentic. I didn't feel like I crossed a boundary. I was devastated that it was brought to light in a massive publication that I did.
Mm-hmm.
That also came at the time there weren't many women on the sideline. We had to work extra hard to prove why we were there. It could have been a job that he wanted, right? So it was a perfect opportunity for him to illuminate what he called a mistake, or what he
Mm-hmm.
thought was an issue. So I would say, first, it's purpose.
Mm-hmm.
If you know it's your purpose, there's something in you that allows you to not let anything else stop you. It's your purpose.
Mm-hmm.
The other piece would be one of my favorite quotes. Eleanor Roosevelt said, "You must do the thing you think you cannot do." And being the first, and a lot of trial by error, and a lot of mistakes, and a lot of coulda, woulda, shoulda, it enables me, when I keep that focus, A, on my purpose, and B, pressing through the fear, I have to do the thing I think I cannot do. That's what keeps me going. And believe me, there are days I'm sure, like, looking back, I'm trying to take inventory of how I felt even directly after that and leading up to the next game, and even when the lights came on for that second game, I'm sure, like knowing myself so well, I'm sure that there was part of me that was so petrified to say the wrong thing, or
Mm-hmm.
um, extra intentional about keeping my reports shorter so I wouldn't have a chance to say too much, right? Um, and I think that that also stifled me. I think that that situation stifled me from really allowing my true personality to come out for many, many years,
Mm.
because I was afraid that if people saw me having too much fun, if they saw me having genuine relationships with players or coaches that were completely professional, but if they saw that, they would assume, oh, she's laughing too much, she's having too much fun, or she doesn't take her job seriously, or, oh, look at her fist bump that player, like, oh, they might be super close behind the scenes. Like, it's stuff like that that women have to
Mm.
deal with, and it sucks. It sucks. And especially now, when I look at the landscape and there's more women than ever, and a lot of that stuff is happening and happening prevalently and happening with no regard to the professionalism. There's a lot of
Mhm.
women that want to be sportscasters because they get to be famous, they get
Mhm.
to meet players. And
Mhm.
that's never been my gimmick. That's never been my
Mhm.
thing. So being accused of those things is what makes
Mhm.
it really challenging, and I have to press in even harder to the fact, this is my purpose. This is
Mhm.
my purpose. And when I tell stories of these athletes, these coaches, these families of these coaches and athletes, that's what makes a difference to me.
Mhm.
It doesn't
I
matter
love
how
this.
famous I am.
I love this because I think what you're speaking to is something that I too have navigated and certainly have um, uh, been in many conversations with high performers in various industries. Um, and it's extremely common, I believe, that at least early on in most people's careers and most people's lives, and unfortunately not, I don't believe enough get to the point where they kind of begin to shift where the motivation stems from. And I believe early in life and early in careers, the motivation is uh, to be impressive enough, right?
Mm,
If I'm just impressive enough, then I get to be worthy. I get to be, validated. I get to be significant. I get to be enough, right? And when you're talking about people getting into your industry specifically, to be famous, my my initial thoughts are to assume that even if that is their motivation, the deeper thing is the belief that they feel or believe they must be impressive. And the way to be impressive is to be, on these networks, is to have the blue check mark, is to whatever that metric is that they feel deems them, enough. Then that's going to be their sole motivation, in hopes that when they get it, then,
yeah.
right. And it's this deep desire, this deep um, hope that we can finally prove something, right? And what I mean by the shifting the motivations is that point in life when we go from needing to prove that we're enough to really aligning with who is it that we want to be, who do we want to become, what's the value that we want to offer others, what's the service that we wish to provide. And you were talking about purpose a little bit earlier, and I've come to understand in my own life that really purpose, one, it's as you well know, it's not a destination, right? It's a motivation, it's an emotional state is what purpose really is, right? But when we speak about purpose, I believe what we're talking about is like, what is the efforts, what are the sacrifices, what are the commitments that we have um uh chosen, decided would be ours, right, in this lifetime, that in order to feel purpose within that effort, it must have two things. There's two keys to be able to experience purpose, and these are non-negotiables. And one of them is that it must require growth, right? Like if you look at anything in life, look at nature, look at animals, look at human beings, right? At birth, right? It doesn't matter what it is. If something has life in it, any life force whatsoever, doesn't matter if it's the bug, the plant, or your newborn. If it has life, it it's hardwired to grow. It's not negotiable. right? If we look at, pictures of ourselves when we were children, we look very different than we do now, right? Because life grows. If you look at a seed versus a tree, it grows. This is how life works. So to have purpose, it must grow, right? I think this is often why people get really um, they find what we often refer to as a functional suffering, a plateau, if you will, kind of a midlife or a quarter life crisis is when you know it's become too mundane, too routine. There's no growth. There's no challenge in it any longer. So they start to lose the meaning of it. They start to feel like, what's the point? What's the purpose? What is life all about? They start to really question these bigger um, ideas because whatever they're doing isn't challenging them. There is no game next week to show up to and face the thing that you don't want to look at or you don't want to feel any longer. So the first thing is growth, and the second thing is what you were mentioning earlier about your motivation and kind of what moves you when interviewing an athlete or creating a project or whatever it may be, is that it must be of value, right? The other
Absolutely.
way to say that is it must be of service to something
Yes.
greater than self. Right.
Yep.
So I love what you said earlier is like you're holding the microphone, but what I heard, this isn't what you said, but what I heard knowing you is you're holding the microphone, but they're telling their story,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Like your microphone, your position, your ability to hold space, ask appropriate questions, create rapport, buddy,
Right.
is to make it safe enough for them to be able to be themselves,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is so ironic given that that's the thing that you just said earlier was what you felt so afraid to be, right?
Yep.
And so I do believe you when you say that this has been your purpose from jump, because your approach to us has always been, and I know this firsthand, to for growth, yours, whether it was intentional that you were to grow or it's just what was required for you to show up the following week, right?
Yeah.
You were so committed that it was non-negotiable. You had to do whatever it took to get to the next week, which required you to face you and grow so that your work could be of service. It could be of value to others because you understood so I believe intuitively that you weren't just reporting on stats of a game. You're not just telling the story of how somebody woke up early, went to the gym every day, twice a day, 3 times a day, left late. That might be the context,
Mm-hmm.
but that was never the story.
Yeah. Yeah.
um
And I
so
really, excuse me,
you're good.
allergies. I really appreciate everything that you just said, and some things were coming back into my mind from just solidifying why I do what I do. It's
Mm,
I was a 3-sport athlete. I love sports. I love telling the stories.
mhm,
Um, I don't love being front and center. I don't love the attention. That's not why I do it. I love facilitating conversations. I love watching games unfold. That's why I love it so much. Um, Getting emails, DMs from people I've never met, family
mm,
members, friends of athletes or coaches whose stories that I've told, those are the things that stick with me. Like I still have letters that I got when I was in my early 20s with ESPN, letters from families um, whose children went on to be some of the top athletes on the planet, in
mhm,
respective pro sports. And I kept those letters. Thank you for telling this story. Thank you for telling it right. Thank you for
mm,
being so thoughtful to get all the details correct. Those kind of things. Thank you for what you said about my family. Thank you for what you said about my brother. Like that just means the world to me. And the most recent one was, and this was a game that you and Mom were at. It was the
mm,
Major League Rugby Finals in Los Angeles in 2021, and LA won. It was their first year in the league, and they won the whole thing. And I interviewed multiple athletes on the stage, and it was on CBS Sports. And one of the
Mm-hmm.
athletes had just announced his retirement. And Adam Ashley Cooper, this Australian rugby player, I would say is the equivalent to a Steph Curry. Like, he's that popular, he's that beloved, he's had that much success. He does that much in the community. Like, he's that beloved in Australia.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm interviewing him. And I remember the interview because it was, again, I'm very intentional and I'm very thoughtful with my questions. I don't like softball questions. There's a time and a place for softball questions, but I also like to get deeper with athletes that I know can handle it. There's some NBA players where I could only ask, what do you think about the first half? But there's other athletes that I can go deep with. So
Right.
with him, I asked him the question, because you gave so much to this sport your entire life, describe what this moment means in terms of this sport giving back to you. And I could see his eyes welling up. And I've had a couple of athletes cry, male athletes cry, which to me is beautiful. Because the mark of a strong human is being able to cry. Like, holding it in does not make you stronger. You know, I know
that I've
that
been strong as shit this week.
I know that
bawling for like 4 days.
Oh my gosh. But there's so much healing in that. But little boys are taught, especially little boy athletes, grown men athletes are taught, don't you dare cry. That's a form of weakness, or heaven forbid, you might be soft. But so this man started to well up tears, and he was just very, very transparent in his answer. And there were a couple other questions I asked him after that. And it was later that night, because obviously his celebration continued all through the night, and I was invited to the league after party, and the champions obviously were there, and he's the only one that never took his kit off. When I tell you, he still had his kit on, which is jersey in rugby terms, and he still had on.
I thought you said kid, and all I saw was a man with like a bajor, like with a baby on his chest, and he just refused to put it down. The visual was amazing.
Yes. He still had his kit on, full jersey, cleats, the whole thing. And that's how he was celebrating. Like, it was like he refused to take, because he was retiring also. So it was almost like he refused to shower, refused to change his clothes. But he pulled me aside and said, that is the best interview I've ever had in my career. And this is the Steph Curry of Australian rugby, who just won a championship. And for him to say that to me, God only knows who's interviewed him over the years. And for him to say that to me, I will never, ever, ever forget that. And if I'm ever down or putting myself down, please remind me of that story, because that to me is why I do what I do. That's why. Because he also said to me, that's the first time I've ever felt like a man and not a number. You made me feel like a human and not just an athlete. And that was, the most affirming moment of my career was hearing that.
Well, I love that too, because, you know, as I know for a fact, as many in the audience who never have the opportunity to interact with, you know, the athletes that they look up to, right? Or the celebrity, whatever the business or whatever they may be in. But the person they idolize, it's rare that we often get the opportunity to be with and interact with these individuals, right? So in our eyes, as just folks in the audience, as spectators, they can feel bigger than life. They can feel unattainable. They can feel
Invincible.
All of these things. And as much as we hear their stories in various ways, it's still difficult for us to imagine that we're like them, right? Or they're like us. And, you know, for someone to be in a position such as yours to interview, that's, you know, has the opportunity to engage with these individuals, you know, and to be able to also have the self-awareness and the understanding of the human that you're speaking with, not just the athlete, right? Like that piece, I think that's a bridge. Quite frankly, your position is the bridge between the spectator and the athlete. It's one thing to watch them, right? We can go to the local bar, we can put on ESPN right now and watch a game, right? But we're just watching an athlete do what an athlete does with whatever, you know, ball or stick they use. But until they get interviewed, until they have a microphone with them, we don't know the human being.
Yeah.
So it's the one and perhaps the only opportunity for there to be a bridge
Yeah.
to see the human, not just the athlete. Um, so I absolutely love that, and your, again, intuition and understanding that you're not just reporting on sports,
Yeah.
you're
Because it's
telling a
not
story.
about me. It's not
Um,
about me. It's about them. It's about telling the story the best I can.
so on that note too, this is so interesting because I'm sitting here thinking about the theme that I recognize in your life, specifically of going first, and the irony that you go first, but you don't want to be the one that's the center of attention, right? You go first, but it's not about you being seen. It's about opening the door for those behind you to have an opportunity. Um, and to be a girl from a small town, to not have any example of your dreams being any more than just a dream, okay? And then to go on and be the first to go to college in the family, to then land, to create, it sounds like, your position at a major university. Like, you created the sports division or whatever that was at the time, uh to then go on and be the first to host the show on ESPN at your age, and all of these amazing things. um how where would you say you found the courage, or how would you even describe it, to to do it? Like, you didn't even, like, I don't even know how to ask the question, to be honest, but how did you find the courage to create something that seemingly did not exist, and if it did, it wasn't possible for people like you from where you were from?
Oh, um, I love that question because I think there's so many people, and there's probably people watching this that, they look at their socioeconomic upbringing or current situation or even skin color, sexual orientation, whatever it may be. It's a limit that they put on themselves. Oh, I'll never be able to do that. I'll never be able to get there. Um, I, man, I said tunnel vision. I just was not going to be denied. Like I had it in my mind and had my mind made up. And I did a lot of behind the scenes stuff to get on camera. I always made it very clear, this is what I want to do. I want to be a reporter. I want to be a host. Um, but I was a runner. I was a runner at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and a runner is exactly what it sounds like. So from where the pit is, where all the
I was
cars
like,
are,
bitch, you never ran in your life.
when
What
I'm
are you
being
talking
chased,
about?
when I'm being chased, or when I'm playing basketball.
So you ran suicides. I guess that counts.
Oh,
But
oh
I
boy.
envisioned you in like a cross country. I'm like, that you
Oh no 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 no
now you're
no.
lying.
Oh yeah. Oh, that would be a bold-faced lie. I do not enjoy running, but
Um,
it was called a runner, and I would have to physically, like, if there were stats or notes or anything, the quickest way that I could get information to the guys calling the race is I had to go run from the pit all the way up to the box to give them the information. That's why they call it a runner.
Kids will
And
never understand.
good Lord, they will never understand. So, and I didn't want to say no to any of that stuff because I also wanted to understand different aspects of everything. I didn't want to just show up and be, because I don't like being called talent, even though that's what it's called in the industry. I don't like being called talent. I'm more than that. I understand what a director does. I understand what a producer does. I understand what a daggone runner does. Like, and I take
Hmm.
none of that for granted because it all enables me to be the best on camera person that I can be. And I also can respect what other people are going through. I know what it's like to be in an editing bay for hours and hours and hours just to cut a 22-minute show. So I know what all that looks like and feels like. Um, all that said, it was the steps that I took. I had a goal. I had a lofty goal. And you know what it's like to be in a small high school and share your dreams with someone because I know this happened to you. And they laugh at you in your face. Well, you better have a plan B. Ha ha ha. You better get a factory job, whatever the case may be. And I didn't let any of that deter me. And I can't explain to you how, except I was not going to take no for an answer. Like, I didn't know how long it was going to take. I certainly didn't expect to be on ESPN at the age of 19 for the first time as still a college junior. I didn't expect that to happen. But it did because of steps that I took and my willingness to do the grunt work to get there. You know, I was fortunate enough to do an internship at a company in downtown Indianapolis that just happened to do primarily auto racing, but all for the major networks. And I made it very clear, this is what I want to do. I want to be on camera. This is what I want to do. From there, I traveled with the NFL, the Sunday Night NFL on ESPN. I was in the truck, totally behind the scenes. Nobody knew who I was. But I knew learning those things, being in that environment, would help me be a better announcer. So it was every step I took enabled me to get ready for that next position. And that's what I did. So it doesn't matter where you're from, what you look like. I mean, people still see me on TV, and I just had someone say to me the other day on Instagram, "I knew you were Asian." And I'm like, "You did? You did? I'm Asian."
Right.
But it's all that, you know, and I took zero offense to that, zero, because I'm a salad of sorts in my ethnicity, which I love.
Right.
But yeah, it's just being open and being fearless, and not being, as much as I don't like making mistakes, not being afraid to make them if I know that it's going to make me better in the long run. We're from a town of 750 people. There's no way I should have done what I did at such a young age, and that I still am able to pursue today.
Yeah. Yeah, no one's used to that kind of town. I'll just put it this way. One of the last times I visited, I got pulled over by
your beautiful fiance.
Yeah, well,
that
before
time?
that,
Oh, okay.
no, before that, I got pulled over because the town sheriff didn't recognize my car. So that was enough to be suspicious, right?
Isn't that so funny? Isn't that so funny?
And it happened to be a guy that I sat next to in English class or whatever it was. So
hilarious.
Well, let that be a little indication of how small it actually was. But
hilarious.
But no, but before we get too far away, something that you just pointed out that I think is so important, and I'm going to take with me among many things, but this one specifically is that, you know, going back to this idea that we all must be impressive in order to X, get the job, start the business, make the money, get the spouse, whatever it is. We believe that we must be impressive, and we all practice these strategies of, you know, how fast, how far, right? It's the idea that you know, when people they're constantly looking for success hacks, the 1, 2, 3 steps, the things, the whatever. And I think it takes some time for most. Many get it very young, but I do think that's youthful ignorance, which is beautiful. That you just got to take what's available to you, right? It's like what you always used to still say to me. It's like, take what the defense gives you. Yeah. It doesn't matter what play you ran or you drew up. Like if they got it covered, you don't just, you know, kneel down, you don't just spike the ball, like you figure it out. Yeah. And you know, the lesson that I took from your story there was that you know, to be 19 at ESPN, many might hear that and think, holy shit, I have to be able to do that. How do I go from where I sit today to ESPN by 19? And that's going to be their focus. But what I heard you say is you kind of accidentally ended up at ESPN at 19 because all you were focused on is what was available to you in that moment, whatever that next step was. And there was no job too low on the totem pole. There was no job too dirty, too beneath, too whatever it was. It wasn't, I can't take that because that doesn't look good. It was, does that get me in the truck? Yeah. Does that get me in the room? Does that, you know, introduce me to can I shake the hand with the person that may or someday hire me for something else? Yep. And, you know, I really hope that we can continue to remind ourselves and apply that, because so many people are trying to figure out what to do on step 12. I mean, that's what I've been doing with this.
Yeah.
How do I get to 100,000 downloads before I start the first one? And until I figure that out, I can't begin, right?
Yeah.
And it's so funny because the only way that you get to 100,000 downloads or 100,000 whatever, dollars, followers, fucking whatever the metric is for people today, take what the defense is giving you.
Yeah.
What is available? Because that's the other thing, the audacity that we have to assume that we know what it's supposed to look like when we've never done it.
Yeah.
Like, I don't care who's done it around you. If you yourself have never been in the trenches with that thing, you have no idea.
Yeah.
You're not supposed to know.
Yeah.
And that's an advantage. Break shit.
Yeah.
Like, because
Yeah.
you're not stuck with how it's always been done.
Yep.
Right.
And the
And
sacrifice. I was not afraid to sacrifice. Like my entire collegiate career pretty much was creating my own lane to do sports that was not offered to me in the telecommunications department. There were so many weekends that I would go back to Indy to this production company, and I would literally for hours and hours and hours just watch these specific auto races and take notes so that we could put our show together later, a show that I was like, you'd never know I was part of, because I was just a note taker trying to make it easier for the producers when we got into the edit bay. And these were tons of weekends, tons of parties, tons of whatever shenanigans I could have gotten into, but I chose not to. So it's, what are you also willing to sacrifice to get your dream? That's the thing. And that's something else that I love about people like us. We didn't grow up wealthy. We didn't grow up
Mhm.
with everything handed to us. And I think that's where a lot of parents fail today. And even I failed as a big sister to
Mhm.
you, because wanting to make your life easier and give you all the benefits and just here's this,
Mhm.
that's easier. Now you can just go forward with exactly what you want to do. We can't take away the lessons, and we
Mhm.
cannot take away the opportunities to make those sacrifices, because when we take time to look back at those sacrifices, everything that we're doing in that moment becomes even more valuable.
Mhm.
When you think about the kid that got the BMW when he turned 16, it's going to be dirty. It's going to be trashed because he's likely not going to take care of it because he's always had that opportunity. Whereas I get a $600 four-speed from a daggone
Mhm.
auction, and that
Auction.
I'll make it look brand new every day because I know what it took to get me in that car. I know the sacrifice it took to get me in that car,
Right.
and that's what's important too.
Yeah, and again, there's so much beauty in this, but I want to hit on that point of failure. Like, I would argue that there's the only failure is the refusal to reflect and recover.
Yeah,
That's the only true failure,
yeah, I
right? As
agree.
long as, because again, we can only, hindsight's 2020, they say, and I firmly believe that if you're genuinely doing what you feel is best to the best of your abilities with what's available to you in that moment, even if you looked at it in hindsight and said, damn, I would do it differently, it's no such thing as a failure. One, because you required that experience. I required those experiences, to understand what I'm doing today, more thoroughly. You require those experiences to, become and understand who you are today, right? Making you only that much more effective when working and interacting with others, be it personal or professionally. So I would say the only true failure is someone that is resistant to reflecting and refuses to do the courageous work, whatever that may look like, to recover. If
Yeah,
there's something that they don't feel was, the best way to do it, or in hindsight they know that they could have done better, um, reach out, say that, have that conversation, take ownership for that.
yeah,
And by the way, that's the success, right? Because when we do that, we're not only relieving, that burden from our soul, our spirit, but we're also, leading by example. You used to tell me all the time, you may be the only Bible someone will ever read,
yeah,
right? And it's the same message. Like, you may be the only example someone ever gets that, I'm sorry, is possible.
yeah,
That's my bad. And then now what? Moving,
yeah,
you get to build on that.
yeah,
Um, But with this, I got a couple more questions that I'd love to ask.
Please.
And then obviously we'll have many more of these in the future. But I would be very curious to know, what would you say your greatest skill is?
Making
So
people feel
first,
comfortable.
I
Yeah.
love it.
Yeah, I
Making
didn't even
people
have
feel comfortable.
I didn't even have to take a beat for that. Like sometimes I need
Mhm.
to train myself when I'm being interviewed to take a beat a little bit longer, but I didn't even need a beat for that. Um,
Good, because it was a
because
hot seat question.
okay, good. Um, it's making people feel comfortable. It's
Love it.
it's. I was taught very early in my career, the lavalier mic that
Hmm.
people will wear. If someone gets up and walks away with still attached, then I've done a really darn good job of making them feel comfortable, and that's happened to me multiple times in my career. And I've had players and coaches tell me things that they didn't say publicly, and I will even ask them. And this would be off camera, and they never said off the record, but I knew a couple players were retiring before they announced it, and I
Yep.
would ask, may I report that? And they said no, not yet. And okay. And I don't know if some of those athletes, if it was a test or whatever, but I passed with flying colors because to me, my integrity and credibility,
Mhm.
I will not trade those things. I will
Yep.
not trade those things.
Yep.
And that's something else I was going to share briefly is there's been many times in my career that I've been asked to do things that would have been outside my integrity, outside my
Hmm.
character.
Hmm.
And I unapologetically said, no,
Hmm.
that's not who I am. Whether it was a script that was handed to me and I'm like, I wouldn't say that. Do you mind if I mean, I don't want to
Hmm.
disrespect you as the producer in this particular thing, but that's not how I would phrase it. Do you mind if I rewrite that? Or worse, I've had multiple times, I've had producers tell me, you should show more of your assets. You should wear a lower cut blouse or a shorter skirt. And I'm like, yeah, no, like, no, I am confident enough in the work that I do. I don't need
Hmm.
to do that. And I don't want to do that. That doesn't make me comfortable. That's not who I am. That's not how I was raised. That's not my integrity. That's not my character. So, no.
Hmm.
And I'm certain that's cost me jobs.
That's
But
fair.
what I can do, while I might not have that money in my pocket or those extra hours of TV under my belt, what I can do is look at myself in the mirror and know
Hmm.
that I did the right thing based on my character and my integrity.
Love it.
Um, yeah, so it's about making others feel comfortable, going back to your question, and also being comfortable with my decisions as well.
So, what would you say your greatest weakness is?
Being way too hard on myself. If if I gave myself the grace and the space that I give everybody else, I would be unstoppable. I feel like I would be unstoppable. Why can't I do that? Like I can say that to you, and I know that in my whole heart, and I've gotten a little bit better over the years, but ultimately, if I gave myself the same grace and space, I am repeating this for myself, by the way,
Hmm.
and for anyone else listening who might experience the same thing. You've heard it said, you're your own worst critic. Yeah,
Hmm.
we are. And I'm glad in terms of because it makes me want to be better, but I can be brutal to myself. Like I will ravage myself before I would give myself a break. And that's unfortunate. That's really
Hmm.
unfortunate because I would never do that to another human being. Why do I do that to myself? Um,
Hmm.
and we can talk about that another time. And I know that a lot of people relate to this. It goes back to multiple traumas of feeling not good enough, not being seen, not being heard, not feeling whatever, fill in the blank for your own life. It's we all have those struggles. I just happen to be in a forward facing national television situation to where it's extra hard for me when I have to hear the playback or know that I just said something on live TV. I'm like, oh, I should have said this or I could have said that better. So it's just giving myself some grace. I mean, golly, I
Hmm.
I'll never claim to be perfect. Far from it. So if I know I'm not perfect, why can't I just be easier on myself?
With that in mind, given that our stories are far from over,
Yeah.
so for the pages that have yet to be written, As you think about your life 10 years from now, right, whatever that may look like, what would you like your story to represent for those of us that look up to you?
That I've continued to lead with integrity and character and thoughtfulness and kindness. That the work I have done and will continue to do, because 10 years from now, I'm still going to look like this.
Mm-hmm.
I want to just leave a positive mark on everybody that I meet and speak to that's even around me for however long the time is, that I'm remembered for being a person who genuinely cares and that tells good stories and that contributes in a powerful way to this world. And that's what makes it. I'm in my off season right now, my rugby off season right now. And it's been extra challenging for me. I'm good for like a month, and I've traveled some, and I'm still going to travel a little bit more before the season starts. I'm good for like a month, and then I'm like, okay, I'm not contributing to the world. I need to be doing something, and then I get extra hard on myself because I'm not consistently doing more TV stuff. I don't take for granted my off season, but being a positive contributor to the world is another way I look at my career. And that's why I wish I could do it every day, because I want to leave that indelible mark. And also in 10 years' time, I will be celebrating my 9th anniversary at least with a gorgeous, amazing man who you will also be close to. You tell me to manifest, I'm a manifest.
This is on record.
This is on record. And just continue to be growing and healing and finding ways to give myself grace and finding ways to continue to allow myself to be the peace that I seek, even when there's chaos around, to let go of control. I don't know if you know this, but I love to control things.
I never heard.
Right? In my own life, particularly. So yeah, I mean, those are some of the things, and I'm in a constant reframing, retraining of my thoughts, because my old thought life was very challenging. My old thought life, it takes a minute to retrain. You know, when your go-to move is, well, what if you're not good enough, or what if I am? How about that one? You know, so it's retraining those type of things. Yeah. So in the next 10 years, I have lofty goals. I've always had lofty goals. I swing for the fences. Yeah, it is. I've got important work to do.
So the last question. What advice would that woman give you today?
Start now. I mean, everything you said, Stacy Renee Paetz, was spot on. And I want that for your life, and I see that for your life. And start now, because why wait? You've never waited for anything else. You've always pushed through everything else. You've always set a goal and reached it in other things. So don't let anything stop you, anything or anyone or any circumstance. And especially don't let rejection keep you down.
Take what the defense gives you.
That's right. Take it. Can I share 2 things before you let me go?
Sure.
Okay. This is bringing things full circle. This is an printed email that I have from you.
Oh, shit.
Friday.
Riddled with typos.
Friday, most likely. Friday, February 4th in the year 2000.
Holy shit.
Yep. Titled Congrats. This is when I was with ESPN, and I just learned that I was going to the ESPYs. So I had shared it with Mom, and she told you, and you emailed me, hey, that is so awesome. The ESPYs, this is your time. Don't be worried about the shows. It comes so natural to you. It's just like you doing a normal show for Channel 13. The best advice I can give you is to take your own. Remember what you told me when I had a bad game? Use that to your advantage. This is so great. How does it feel to be so close to your dream? Call me when you can. Love you lots. P.S. It's L-U-V, L-O-T-Z. Love you lots. But I've kept this. I've kept this obviously for 23 years, almost 24. And I keep it in my little travel Bible. And there's also one more thing I want to share with you over my shoulder this way. Okay, so this right here was the second time I was in Sports Illustrated. Okay, the second time. Huge picture of me there, and it's also down here, and it's the pop culture grid. It's myself, Ron Lewis, who was a guard for Ohio State at the time, Al Jefferson, who played for the Celtics at the time, and they asked a series of questions. So I'm here, Stacy Paetz, Fox Sports. One of the first question was, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much would you like Angelina Jolie to adopt you? And I said 10 because Brad Pitt would be my daddy. But it asked a series of questions there, and it's so that was the second time that I was in Sports Illustrated, this time in a positive way. I love stories of redemption, and that's just a tiny little redemption for me in that moment. It came 20 years later, I think, but I had that one framed. Hells yeah.
Like I said, there's no failure if you're willing to reflect and recover.
Yep.
Stacy, thank you so much. There's so many more questions. Genuinely, we'll obviously do this more and more. But I guess the last one that I would ask, and I meant to ask this earlier, and then we'll close on this, because I want it to be real, and I want to also lead by example. So I'm in a seat that you are very comfortable in, right, in this conversation. What would your critiques be? How could I improve this when I speak to the next person?
First of all, something that you've always been so good at is you're a great listener and you proffer beautiful advice. You've always been that way. You've had that gift since you were a kid, and I always saw it. And this, seeing you in your purpose, gives me all the life, because I always saw you doing something like this. You just needed to see you doing something like this, because the advice that you offer, the thoughtfulness that you have in listening, the care you have in choosing your words to guide people is authentic. And I'm not just saying that because you're my brother. I'm not just saying that because I had a hand in raising you. It's you.
2 hands around my neck
hands.
Sometimes.
For sure. It's you. It's authentic. It's you. It's who you've always been. I would say the only piece of advice that I have, because I love your questions, I love your follow-ups, I love your circling back and you're tying things up. I would say the one thing with this in particular is you did not introduce me off the top. You did not welcome us to the show. You did not introduce yourself or me. And I was going to say at the end of this recording, we should do that so that your editor can
That's
put
the
that
intro.
at the top. Yep, that's it. That's it.
Thank you. And as I learn the format and that kind of thing, and we will, my intention is, as soon as we get off here, I'm going to recap a little bit, and then that will live at the front end of the show.
Yeah.
That's
the only thing. That's the only thing. I mean, and that's just, again, repetition. That's all that is. That's all that is. The key components, the most important parts, you do innately. You do authentically. I can't coach you because you already did it. You're already doing it.
Thanks, folks.
Welcome, folks. I love you.
All right. I love you. Ready. Well, I'm going to get to that. And again, thank you. I got to hear some stories today that I've never heard. So that's really fun. And I guess if there's anything I would say to close it up is start today.
Start today.
Love you.
Love you.